Morning all, let's have a look at the round 1 encounter between Super Grandmaster Gata Kamsky 2741 and Alexander Shabalov 2544. Both of these players from ex-USSR. Shabalov was born actually in Riga, Latvia in 1967. He actually studied under former world champion and fellow Rigan Mikhail Tal, the legend. So he came to the United States in 1992 and settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Gata Kamsky came around about the same time actually. He was born in Siberia in a particular place called Norfolk Kuznetsk in Siberia, and now lives in New York. He came to the States in around 1989. So, okay, Gata kicked off with e4, and Alexander played the French defense, and we see actually after d4, d5, the Tarrasch variation, knight d2, avoiding the pin. If you play knight c3, you're inviting the winner pin. But knight f6, not a more sharper, perhaps more open game with c5. This is a more closed position now after e5, one which I've suffered greatly last season actually in black sides of French defences. I didn't do particularly well with this space disadvantage as black. Will black fare better in this game? Knight fd7, f4, c5, fairly standard so far, c3, knight c6, and now the most standard move is knight d to f3, believe it or not. So white can readily support, if needed, d4 even more. What we see in this game is actually knight gf3, which I guess many on YouTube will consider the most sensible move, but actually it is a much rarer bird than knight df3. And now good options for black, popular options rather, are queen b6 or cd, trying to exploit perhaps white's king and this diagonal, and potentially this is a useful bishop b4 resource as well as f6. So is d4 shaky here? Well, black doesn't really test it with queen b6 or cd. He plays actually bishop e7, and now actually white plays d takes c5, bit of a crafty move. If black takes with say knight takes c5, white has b4, and here this would be a pleasant position. There's no protection of e5, good space advantage in this position. And if bishop takes c5 again, well, knight b3 here is okay, bishop b6, bishop d3, this is an okay position as well for white. White could aim perhaps like this and then castle. So here actually black doesn't automatically recapture. He plays actually a very clever move, a5, and maybe a4 even, and then take on c5 to avoid these possibilities of both b4 and knight b3. But knight b3 is played here immediately, a4, knight bd4. So what is Gata doing with this system after knight takes c5? Well, he's got rid of his problematic d4. It can't be undermined if it's not there. He's replaced it with a piece. Nimzovich conceptualized this, that you don't actually have to occupy the center with pawns. You can have control of the center, and sometimes with pieces will do it. So white's trying to keep control of the center with pieces now. Bishop e3, he's got a good control over the d4 square. Black castles. And now a3 might be a concern, so a3 stamped out with white playing a3. It does weaken the b3 square, and this next move looks as though it's eyeing b3, but also knight c4 looks fairly tempting. Queen c2, preparing to batten down the hatches against knight c4, because now bishop f2. The queen is also usefully placed against these kind of attacks on b2 here. Rook a6. And white doesn't really want to take on c4 here. If he takes on c4, that leaves a horrible pawn eyeing d3 here. This is not very nice. So he tolerates the knight on c4. He just plays bishop e2. And now perhaps this is the most dubious move of the game, as it does provide a slight compromise. f5, dubious move of the game so far. So what's the problem with f5? Well, clearly black might have been concerned that white might indeed have some aggressive plan for f5 later himself, but it's some time away to prepare for f5, surely, with the pressure on e5, etc., and black's options for f6. So maybe this wasn't entirely needed, but black played f5, and the pawn structure changes very quickly now, giving both players completely different plans. White takes on f6, okay, and black takes with the rook, and now we see that the e5 square would be nice potentially for a white knight, but first there's an issue of f4 which has to be dealt with. White plays g3, and it looks as though, you know, usually in the French you want to liberate with e5, but it looks as though the liberating move e5 in this position, pardon me, might not be completely working. White has the strong, white has the strong knight takes e5 in this position, because he's got that pin on the rook here, putting pressure on c4. So that would be pretty nasty for black. If white was forced to play f takes, then this would be fine, even retreating the rook. This bishop's liberated. There's options, you know, even coming over here. But it's been ruled out. It's not. I don't think it's possible to play this e5 here. So rook b6, attacking b2. That's protected, not fearing any knight a3 at the moment. The queen's protecting the rook. Bishop d7. And this looks like a very dangerous bishop maneuver coming up to skewer and exploit that queen and rook situation after castles bishop e8. But just in time now, white plays the forcing move, bishop takes c4, d takes c4, knight e5, not only covering d3, attacking c4, but protecting against bishop g6. So just in time, a nicely perched knight there on e5. Queen d5, and the other knight now comes to f3, protecting that knight, also threatening to evict the queen, and this is quite unpleasant pressure on this diagonal now as well. So black tries to stop a lot of the problems of that. Rook d6 is played here. Now without that pin against the rook, I think knight d3 is possible against rook d1. It looks as though that's possible, but black now plays, white now plays an interesting move. He's already given up one bishop, and this seems to be very interesting, that actually he gets rid of black's option of knight d3 altogether, quite radically, by just taking that bishop off. The bishop takes knight, so giving black the bishop pair. Queen takes c5, king g2. I wonder how most of you would evaluate this, giving up the bishop pair like this, but there's a stranglehold on e5 here. Is this diagonal going to be useful for black against white's king? We see rook f5, and now curiously h4. So white's gaining space, and this is potentially a menacing pawn. Bishop f6, rook bd1, wanting to swap a pair of rooks off. Black voluntarily gets rid of that knight for his dark square bishop. Check. King just goes to h2, b5. So without the bishop pair, what is black up to here? Does he really think this bishop will be dangerous on the diagonal? Exchange of rooks. Queen e2, rook f8, rook d1, bishop d5, rook d4, and it looks as though white's in control here of the position. The only real concern is this bishop on the diagonal. It's not really a concern, but he's also got a 3-2 here. This is a blockaded pawn on e6. It's not going anywhere. The knight, nicely perched, is a fantastic blockader here. These pawns are not going anywhere, so white's actually got a free pawn in the form of this h pawn in this position. The other pawns are kind of immobilized, and after queen c7, this h pawn is the asset used, the special asset used, h5, threatening things like queen g4 and h6 will be unpleasant. Queen D8. And here, this is a really, really powerful move. I wonder if anyone can guess it. If I give you 10 seconds, what would you play here with white? This Rook D4, let's give you a clue, is protecting F4, which means potentially G4 is on the cards. G4 is potentially on the cards here. But there's a downside to G4, that the Queen could come to H4, and this next move is really powerful prophylaxis. What would you play if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, amazingly, King H3. I just thought, what is this? King H3, the king walking to H3. But it means now G4 is possible without any Queen H4s. Queen C7, Queen E3. After Queen A7, it's like the Queen's given up being on that diagonal. Now G4. The squeeze on the king side is impressive. What is black doing? 25-4-4 GM without counterplay here. He voluntarily gave up his bishop pair. This menacing knight blockading his pawn. White has the options with the aggressive pawns now on the king side. Black's just sitting there waiting passively. Rook E8, King G3. What can black do? Bishop A8, preparing at least the battery now and to evade with the queen. Looks optimistic as a plan, but what else? G5, Queen B7. Okay, the Queen G2 threat is extinguished. But what about this Queen H1? Queen H1 is played. The problem is for black now, this H6 is an absolutely crunching move, undermining black's king safety in the F6 square here. Let's see. If black played G6, for example, here, Knight G4, and that's horrible. For example, Rook F8, Queen takes E6 is crashing through. If Queen C6 here, Queen E5, threatening mate, and this gets hair-raising, but ultimately, slightly hair-raising. Ultimately, white is absolutely crushing black here. Check, checks run out, Rook H2. And now it's white's turn to give checks. And this position, which I've checked with an engine, is really neat tactically, actually. White has Knight D5 here, threatening mate. And there's nothing actually black can do in this position which is any good. If E takes, then we just play check and we win the rook there. And the queen supported by the pawn. So this position is absolutely gone. If King G8, then actually in this position there's the crushing Rook D2, threatening Knight F6 and Rook D7, and there's really no defence here. So this invasion on the dark squares, I just wanted to give you a demo of that after H6, is really, really impressive in this game. G takes H6, let's go with the obvious. Then Knight G4, not only threatens Knight F6, but Knight H6 might be useful. So HG, we can leave both options with FG. Doesn't matter about sacrificing a pawn here. And this is crunching. So say Queen B7, Knight F6 check, just winning the rook. Or worse, well, winning the rook is enough here. So this is absolutely crushing, this undermining of black's king safety after H6. It doesn't matter about the queen on H1 here, it seems. Black tried bishop E4. The queen's now evicted with rook H2. Queen B1. It's all over, really. The bishop is driven back. Goes back to B7, and now HG with the nasty Knight G4 coming up. Black is helpless. He plays rook D8. Too little, too late. Queen B6 now attacking everything. Virtually everything. And black is forced to resign here. The queen's also controlling that G1 from afar as well. Very controlled game, destroying black's counterplay. Getting this amazing asset, this H-pawn, and some very subtle king movements in this game make it stand out for me. There's a very special victory, very controlled, without much counterplay from Shabalov. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.